Today I'm doing my review of a pair of threes. Now, if you play cards at all, you'll know a pair of threes is not real strong, but sometimes it wins. Now, first, I would like to do a shout out to a really awesome channel, A Fox and Her Thoughts. This little channel's got some really good book reviews and movie reviews and a lot of other entertaining videos. It doesn't get enough love from the community, so I thought I would do a shout out to this young lady. I'll have a link to her channel down in the description, so after you've watched my video, of course, go ahead and check her out. I think you'll really be impressed. She does good videos. All right, well, let's get on with the show. Today I'm reviewing a book and a short story. So first we're going to take a look at the book. It is The Hanging City by Charlie N. Holmberg. Now, The Hanging City is about a young lady. I think she's 19 years old, and she goes by Lark. And she lives in sort of a post-apocalyptic world. There's been a many year drought, and the cities of humanity are pretty much laid ruin, and there's like villages here and there. And Lark has a very special gift or curse, depending on how you want to look at it, that she can inflict fear. She has the ability to project absolute terror into pretty much any enemy. And in her lifetime, she has found that her abusive father took advantage of her gift. And when she ran away from her father and she moved about from one village to another, she would be happy there for a while, but sooner or later she would find a need to use her gift or curse. And the superstitious people would either run her off or make it necessary for her to just leave. So she couldn't find a real place to call home. Well, she had heard, I'm going to use my little cheat sheet here a little bit. She had heard of a city called Kagmar. That is a city of the Trolls, which is the polite word that they prefer, that the humans would refer to more as trolls. Now, in this story, a troll is not a little short guy with a helmet. Probably the most famous, well-known trolls are Tolkien's story. And they're not, little gnomes or, little fellers that run around getting into mischief. In this story, a troll is 7 feet tall or more, broad and muscular, having, green or gray skin, having protrusions, kind of like, I'm not sure how to describe what I read. Is it, like little horns or little bumps among their skin and stuff like that. Well, anyway, a troll is a big scary thing. And, but the city is known to welcome humans, at least that's the belief. And so she feels that maybe there she can find a real home and settle down permanently, which is what she really wants. She wants a place to call home. So anyway, she travels for a very long time, moving about from one village to another, walking across basically desert lands. It's not actually set in the desert, but pretty much everything is for this multi-year drought. I don't think they'd seen rain for, I don't know exactly how long it was, but let's say 100 years. I mean, it's like a serious drought. By the time she comes to the Empyrean Bridge, which is a big, massive bridge over this large gap, a big crack in the earth, and it is referred to as the Crack of Mavea. I think I'm saying that right. There are a lot of names and a lot of words in this story that pronunciation is going to depend on who you are, where you're from. Just, pronounce it the best way you can. I don't think it matters that much. But anyway, she approaches the bridge, and under this bridge is the city of Kagmar. That is a multi-level city that is based on the castes of the inhabitants, which is primarily the Trolls. And so the higher up you are, the more powerful you are, you're in the better levels of the city. And then as your caste goes down to a lower level, weaker Trolls, you go down in caste, and down in power and authority. And at the very, very bottom of the caste rating is the human beings, which actually don't have a caste. They're not really a caste. They're just at the bottom of the totem pole. So human beings must step aside when a troll comes walking along and, preferably not make eye contact and basically just stay out of the way. Humans are welcome there, and they're not really mistreated by most Trolls. They're just able to live there when they have nowhere else to go, which, well, that's pretty much Lark. So Lark gets to the city of Kagmar, and she goes before the High Council of the Trolls, and she meets, and again, pronouncing names, Kekwan. That's what I'm going to pronounce it. Kekwan is the leader of all the Trolls, supposedly the bravest, the biggest, the most powerful, the highest caste of all the Trolls. And there's a council that he's on, and of course he's the leader, pretty much the king, and he's got a handful of council members that are right up there, the same caste as him, maybe one notch below him. So when Lark arrives there, she has to go before the council and pretty much has to convince the council to let her live there, to welcome her into their city and let her take a place among the humans there. And so at first, it's like, well, why let her come in here, And so she explains to Kekwan that she has a unique power. And so, I'm kind of skipping along here, but she ends up demonstrating her power on him. So in order to convince them that she might be useful. And so he says, okay, go ahead, show me what you got. So she does. She, expels total terror into him. And it comes up several times in the story. The reaction to fear is either fight or flight. And that just generally means when people get terrified, or even Trolls, when something gets terrified, it'll either fight you or it'll run away. Kekwan, being the leader and being who he is more prone to fight. So he nearly kills her in a reaction to being terrified. Now, most of the characters in the story, be they Trolls, human, or even the animals that live down deep in that crevice below the city, most have run away. They flight. And but anyway, he's very impressed by her gift or curse, depending on how you want to look at it. So I'm going to quote something that is said here that I thought was pretty neat. Ikalad, if I'm saying it right, is a member of the council, and Ikalad considers Lark and says, "Will you allow her to wield a sword?" Kekwan responds, "She doesn't need to. She is a sword." So I thought that was a pretty cool little quote. Him recognizing that, barehanded, this skinny little 19-year-old girl is a weapon of her own with her gift or curse. So moving along, she gets to know a lot of the Trolls and then some of the humans that live there as well. And she finds that she has friends and foes amongst both the Trolls and the humans. And particularly there's a really big high-level troll called Grodd, I think is how you say his name. And, he kind of hates her. So that becomes a real problem. And then she meets Eunuch, which is a female troll that she ends up working with. And their job is to kind of go down on the edge of this cliff and do battle with any monsters and creatures that want to come up out of there. And they're described in several different ways, the monsters that are in the story. For simplicity's sake, I'll say maybe small dinosaurs. Something along that line for a visual. And so that kind of becomes her job to kind of help them fight those off and keep them out of the city and keep them away from the city. And of course, the best way she can do that is to inflict her fear on these critters that makes them run away. Well, Enoch has a brother named Asmar. And again, pronunciation is up to the reader. And Lark, a 19-year-old human girl, and she's tall for a human girl. She's like 6 foot tall. Asmar is like 7.5 foot, I think, 8 feet tall. He's big, real big, very muscular. Think Arnold Schwarzenegger plus with green skin. So Asmar is a pretty big fella. And the reason I point that out is because one of the big points of the story is that Asmar and Lark fall in love with each other, which is taboo and maybe not officially, but generally is forbidden by the population of the city. And so that does present a problem for him. And now we'll get into some of the pluses and minuses. Like any of my reviews, this is my opinion. That just means some guy in Kentucky read the book. What did he think of it? You know, somebody in another city, a younger man or a young woman, could read the story and get a completely different take on it. But for me, this is a sort of a fantasy adventure / romance story. And there's some, fantasy with the trolls and all. And there's some adventure. Her evil father comes along with a big army to basically, make war against the Trolls. And, there's a whole scene with that, a big battle and all of that kind of stuff. And it's pretty good. What really kind of stumped me in this story and resulted in the star rating that I gave it is there's two things that really just didn't work for me. I went to Amazon when I looked to pick this book up, and then I went back to Amazon probably less than halfway through the story, and then I went back to Amazon again before finishing the story to try to see how that story was rated, what category was it in, and if I remember correctly, it's considered to be a fantasy romance. Well, initially, unless it says otherwise, you assume that's an adult story, adult fantasy. And, correct me if I was mistaken in making that assumption, but I took it to be this would be an adult fantasy story. All the way through the story, it is written as a YA fantasy. Particularly, I think the perfect audience for this book would be 10 to 12-year-olds, very young. And it's written that way. Not that it's juvenile or boring. It's just very delicate in how it's written. You have a romance between a troll, as I've described them, and a human girl. And anything that would be considered the connection between the two is just completely skipped over. When they find that they're in love with each other, they start kissing. I think they sit on the bed. And the next morning, she feels okay with their encounter. That's YA to me. I mean, that's, completely skipped over that whole thing. And, I dig horror, thrillers, and fantasy. I'm definitely an adult at my age. And I was, curious, how's this going to work with this big, massive, powerful troll? Just exactly what would their romance be like? And I was very disappointed that it completely skipped over that. Skipped over anything even related to that. Aside for some kissing and some googly eyes, that's about the limit of it. And really the whole story is sort of like that. There is some excitement when some of the monsters come along. There's a little bit of excitement when both human and trollless show themselves to be bad guys. It's not a boring story by any means. But again, nowhere on Amazon did it say it is a YA story. And so I was expecting an adult story. And it is written for a 10 or 12-year-old, in my opinion. So for me, that's a bummer. 1 star gone. And then the second thing that really got to me, I think it was around chapter 26, chapters 26 and 27, I believe. That's when it really hit hard. It's true throughout the story that the pace of the story is just all over the place. Sometimes incredibly slow, sometimes very fast, and it jumps back and forth between those at an uncomfortable way. Particularly in chapters 26 and 27, Lark, this young lady, she like moves around from what is described as a pretty good distance between her father's camp in the Trollus city and some other place, and across this desert, and to the camp, and to the father, and to the city. And within 2 chapters, she makes this trip like a pinball jumping around in a pinball machine. And if you're too young to know what a pinball machine is, just think like scattered jumping all over the place. And it was super duper fast paced, which is, in this case, is not a good thing. It was too fast. It strongly felt that like the author was getting tired of writing it and just wanted to hurry up and get it done. And as a reader, you're like, gee, what's going on? It's like so fast. It's like, one paragraph, she's here. The next paragraph, she's, 5 miles over here. And another paragraph, she's back over there. And it was just so fast, lightning fast in those 2 chapters. And I found that very unpleasant. And it continued on and off throughout the story, but particularly in those 2 chapters, it was a very crazy pace. And then there's parts in the book that are very slow. So, I mean, the pacing of this story, in my personal opinion, was just way off. There went a 2nd star. 2, what I consider to be pretty big issues in this book. It's well written. It's pretty clean. Not a lot of typos or editing problems. Nothing like that. It's entertaining. A tween would freaking probably love it. And I'm sure there's a lot of men and women that would really enjoy the story. I'm not trying to say it was a bad story, because it wasn't. I'd even recommend it, not heavily. I'm not going to jump up and down and yell, but it's a pretty good little book. It's an interesting concept for a story, and it does follow through pretty nicely. I've had some people, or heard some people, kind of complain about the ending of the story. I was okay with it. It left it open for a sequel. The writer could certainly pick it right up from there and write a sequel. But as it ended, it does work as a standalone book. It could just close there, and it's a little happy ending for a little happy story that, again, it seems very YA fantasy to me. And again, at least I couldn't find anything on Amazon that said that this was a YA story. And that just really bothered me. It's sort of like if you're looking for a romance story and you find a horror story. You'd be disappointed because you wanted to read romance. I was looking for an adult fantasy that would have a lot of grit to it, and this was very much a fluffed over kids story, at least in my opinion. So, as you may have picked up on from the intro of this video, I have a pair of 3. The Hanging City by Charlie N. Holmberg is, in my opinion, a 3-star story. 3 stars out of 5, for the reasons that I've stated herein. Moving on to the second story I want to talk about. The first, The Hanging City, was a novel. This is a short story by a very famous writer, Edgar Allan Poe. And the name of the story is, the title of the story is, Never Bet the Devil Your Head. Now, I got a big old collection of Edgar Allan Poe's writing on Amazon at an insanely low price. I was so tickled. And there's, it's pretty much his incomplete works. All of his poems, all of his short stories, everything is in there. And the first review I did out of that book was The Raven. Now, The Raven is super duper well known, extremely popular. And I did in my review how I took that poem, and I think it was a very good review. So I decided what would be the next thing out of that collection that I would want to do. And I was browsing around through there, and I thought, why not do something maybe not even heard of. And Never Bet the Devil Your Head was certainly that. As far as I know, I've never heard of that story. I don't remember anyone ever talking about it. So I thought, hey, I'll check that one out, see what it's about. So I want to point out again, the title of the story is Never Bet the Devil Your Head, written by Edgar Allan Poe. It's got a subtitle, A Tale with a Moral. I think I'm saying that correctly. Moral to the story? Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of this little story. Now the story is 8 pages long, something like that. And the first quarter of it, at least, is kind of fascinating in its own way. Because the first quarter of the story is Edgar Allan Poe talking about pretty much his rivals, people in his position, in his time. It was pretty well known, at least I've heard, that, you know, he was an editor and a commentator of his time, and he wasn't very popular. He could be pretty honest and rough with some of the writing of others, and they say I think he was known to be somewhat sharp-spoken, and he wasn't well liked among his colleagues. I'm going to actually read a quote, and that'll pretty much sum up what I'm trying to say. There is no just ground, therefore, for the charge brought against me by certain ignoramuses that I have never written a moral tale. In more precise words, a tale with a moral. So he refers to some of his colleagues or rivals as ignoramuses, as just plain stupid. He does use that word, or stupidity. So the first quarter of this story, Never Bet the Devil Your Head, is interesting in that it's Edgar Allan Poe pretty much ranting about these people and how he does write stories with morals. And this particular story, Never Bet the Devil Your Head, will prove that point. It definitely has a moral. So that's kind of the gist of what Edgar Allan Poe does in about the first quarter of this story. Then we get into the actual story. So Poe begins his story talking about a friend named Toby Dammit. That's his name. And Toby Dammit is kind of a boisterous guy, and he likes to brag a lot, and he likes to claim, you know, I bet you this, I bet you that. Now, he never actually puts any money down on these bets. He's not really a gambler, but he loves to bet. I can bet you this, and I can do that, and I bet you I can do the other. And over the course of a lot of time, Toby Dammit picks up the phrase, I bet the devil my head that I could do that. And he's just boasting, and he got to where that pretty much was his go-to bet. You know, hey, I bet the devil my head that I could go there, and I bet the devil my head that I could go there, or whatever. You get the idea. And so the story itself, from that point forward, is super duper short and extremely hard for me to talk about without giving it away as spoilers. But I will say that his bragging and boisterous attitude and his phrase of choice get him in trouble, get him in some pretty good trouble. And right about then, the story ends. So, is it one of Poe's best works? No, I don't think so. Without the first quarter, the fascination of Poe actually ranting about these other people and justifying his own writing, I found that interesting that he did that in the beginning of this story. And so I think that's pretty entertaining to me. And then this story itself is a very quick, very simple, very basic little story where Toby Dammit gets himself in a mess with his famous most chosen phrase. So I'm going to leave it there because you may want to read this story. It's not going to knock you down like The Pit and the Pendulum or The Fall of the House of Usher. It's not in that class. There's a little bitty short story, very small plot, very little. Like I said, you got 8 pages. The first 2 or 3 pages, maybe 3 or 4 pages, I don't know, 2 or 3 I'm going to say, is Poe ranting. And then we get into this little tale, so it's super short. But I think I do recommend it just because it's so different than his more super famous stories. It takes no time to read. It's very quick. And I'm not going to say it's like super entertaining, but it's kind of cute entertaining. It's kind of like, oh, okay, I see the moral. It's sort of like that. And again, for me personally, the best part of the story is, as I've said quite a bit, at the beginning with Poe pretty much speaking to the reader. I enjoyed that part. So again, this short story, I give it 3 stars. I give it 3 stars because it is such a very simple and extremely short little story. There's really not much to it at all. And it's kind of entertaining for what it is. So it gets 3 stars. And it is something you probably wouldn't expect from Edgar Allan Poe. Oh, you'll expect the rant. But the story itself is rather simplistic, where a lot of his stories are not. So you've got Hanging City, the novel I spoke about, and the short story, Never Bet the Devil Your Head. Both of these are 3s. I give both of them 3 stars. And if you remember my video, that was a tag video, How Do We Rate Our Books, I hope you will remember that I consider a 3-star book to be a fine little book. It's got its little issues somewhere. It's got something that ain't working, a little here and there, just for me personally. And then a 4-star is a nearly perfect book. It's really clean, and there's just something about it that just quite didn't make it for me. Or it was just a real good book. That's 4 stars. And then, of course, a 5-star for me, by now you've caught on, it exceeds expectation. And there's not a whole lot of stories that do that, but when they're really good in every way that a 4-star is, and then they go one step further, that's 5-star. All right, so the only reason I'm ranting about this is some people feel, oh, I got a 3-star review. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That means for that reviewer, there was something about the story that just didn't quite work. Maybe it was the editing, a lot of typos, a lot of issues, a lot of plot holes. Maybe there was not much of that, but the story itself was lacking in some way for that reader. But overall, they read the story front to back, finished the story, and they could tell someone, this is a good story, it's pretty decent. This or this didn't quite work for me, but overall it's a pretty decent story. Keep that in mind. I'm not putting down either one of these tales. They're both good stories, and another reader may rate them 4 or 5 stars, I'd be surprised if anybody thought in terms of 1 star or 2 star. Both of these stories are worth better than that. And as you know, I don't do 1 star or 2 star ratings. I don't do them at all, out of respect for all the work that a writer puts into their stories. Okay, so I guess that's enough for me rambling on. Just want to wish you a wonderful, happy holiday. As you may have caught on at the very beginning of the video, we're in October, Halloween, very fun time of year that I think most people enjoy. So enjoy yourselves, and I'll get back on here as quick as I can with, it'll either be a tag video or another review. Be looking for it, though, because I know that soon I'll be doing a review on Code Red by R. St. Clair. I loved that story, and I can't wait to do the review on it. So, please click that subscribe button, give it a like. Be looking for that review. I think you'll enjoy it very much because, well, obviously, that's a 5-star story, in my opinion. It rocked, and I'll tell you all about it it'll either be the next video or the one after that. My schedule's pretty crazy, and I don't know when I'm going to get around to what, to be honest. But, that will be coming out soon. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to try to edit this video down a little bit because I'm a chatterbox. But I hope you enjoyed this show, and I hope you have a very wonderful day. Bye-bye.